Welcome to the show, Our Democracy, the CJR Show. In this show, we will discuss questions of democracy, governance, elections, and other topical issues in Guyana and occurrences in countries around the world. We hope the show will be of interest to everyone. So let's begin the show. Good day. Welcome to another edition of the CJR Show, Our Democracy. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, and there are some interesting developments at the global level that I wish to comment on and to share with you. Today I will focus on the following issues. First, Venezuela's incursion in Guyana's territorial waters. Then the question of President Trump and the visit by the President of Ukraine to the White House. And then we will also discuss the whole question of what I describe as Mr. Netanyahu, or Prime Minister Netanyahu's final solution, put that in inverted commas. And then a kind of a rhetorical question, which is, what is the West up to? Now, let's begin with Venezuela's incursion in Guyana's territorial waters. You recall on last Saturday, I did raise this question with viewers, and I introduced the whole subject of the incursion by a Venezuelan military aircraft in Guyana's waters that told the ExxonMobil platforms that they should leave the waters because it belongs to Venezuela. Of course, that request was ignored. And then eventually, there was a standoff for a couple of minutes, and then the Venezuelan vessel left. Now, since I last spoke to you on Venezuela's violation of our territorial integrity, there has been some further developments. What are those developments? Those developments include greater condemnation by international organizations, some of which Guyana is part. For example, the Caribbean Community issued a very strong statement calling on Venezuela to remove its vessel from Guyana's territorial waters. The Commonwealth of Nations, through the Secretary General of Commonwealth, also issued a very strong statement along the same lines. The OAS, which Guyana is an integral part and a member, issued a similarly strong statement. Then the United Kingdom, this now at the bilateral level, the United Kingdom, France, and the USA all issued public statements. Now, through those public statements, they all condemned the Maduro regime's blatant violation of Guyana's territorial integrity and national sovereignty. They all unanimously call for the immediate withdrawal of Venezuela's military presence in Guyana's territorial waters and for a cessation of hostilities. The President of Guyana, Mr. Irfan Ali, also met and briefed the opposition leader on the matter. Now, in my view, Venezuela's action was a classic, but I emphasize, botched tit-for-tat attempt by Maduro. Now, you recall that President Trump shut down the operations of Chevron in Venezuela. And that, of course, meant that no oil will be exported from Chevron from Venezuela. The effect of this action by the US president was aimed at depriving Mr. Maduro of much needed resources. And it was precisely that, I believe, that apparently pushed President Maduro to retaliate by sending some of his gunboats, sending one of his gunboats to threaten ExxonMobil's legitimate operations in Guyana's territorial waters. But what happened was that Mr. Maduro, realizing that the United States was not prepared to entertain any fooling around, the Venezuelan bully boys quickly put their tails between their legs and backed off and hurriedly returned to home base. I hope that some lessons were learned from the Venezuelans in respect to that adventurous action which they initiated. In the meantime, Guyana remains on high alert and regularly updates its international partners on the situation. So we need to keep an eye on this development for further, hopefully, Venezuela would have learned a lesson and there will be no more actions of this nature to threaten or to intimidate ExxonMobil operations in our territorial waters. That being said, let's now move on to what I describe as Netanyahu's final solution. Now, you know, Mr. Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel. And Israel has been coming in for a lot of blows recently, over the past years, that is, because of the pressure, because of the war that they have unleashed on the Palestinians and the Gaza Strip. We have seen the photographs, we've seen the footage, we've seen the television reports, and we've seen what some have described as genocide on the television. Now, what do I mean by final solution? Let me put that in context. Recall Adolf Hitler had a final solution for the Jews who he held in concentration camps across Nazi-occupied Europe. I'm talking about before 1945, while the war was still going on. His plan was to starve and exterminate the Jewish prisoners by burning them in furnaces. I had the privilege, when I visited Poland and Germany, to see some of the furnaces in which they burnt hundreds, perhaps thousands of prisoners in order to get rid of them. However, Mr. Trump, or President Trump's plan, on the other hand, was quite different. His aim, as he publicly declared, was to push the Gazians out of Gaza into Egypt and Jordan, and to transform Gaza, as he said, into Riviera of the Middle East. In other words, a posh, high-end location where only what do we call the big shots and people who with lots of money can go and spend time. Interestingly enough, however, both Egypt and Jordan opposed that move. Suffice it to say that there are already thousands of Palestinians living in Egypt and Jordan. And to push more than about 2 million more Palestinians from the Gaza Strip into Egypt and Jordan, one can very well imagine what that would mean for the Egyptian government as well as the Jordanian king. Now, in the meantime, Mr. Netanyahu came up with his own plan, what I describe as the final solution. What was that? His final solution, and this was publicly declared, is to block and deprive the Palestinians of food, water, and medicine. Now, this is what he's been doing all the time. But while the ceasefire was going on, which Mr. Trump had commanded Mr. Netanyahu to put in place, Netanyahu went a step forward and said, okay, I'm going to hold the ceasefire. But while doing so, I'm going to deprive the Palestinians of food, water, and medicine. Now, all of this madness and inhumaneness is being promoted in the holy month of Ramadan, which is observed by Muslims across the world, and in Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and the occupied section as well. So to me, it looks like Mr. Netanyahu was testing President Trump to see if he would play ball. Not unsurprisingly, President Trump refused and told Netanyahu to back off. There was no way, it appeared to me, that President Trump would want to be a peacemaker in Europe, that is in respect to Ukraine, and at the same time a warmonger in the Middle East. This, obviously, he was not prepared to do, because the President of the United States had declared himself as a peacemaker. So there's no way he could have been a peacemaker in Europe and a warmonger in the Middle East. As far as the US President was concerned, the message had to be one. So he refused to play by Netanyahu's ball as the former President Biden had done. In the meantime, the Middle East countries, or most of the Arab countries in the Middle East, have published their own plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, and for the implementation of that plan, as well as the financing of the plan. Because any plan requires an implementation plan and how that plan is to be financed. And the Arab countries have done their homework and they have made that plan published. So, what needs to be done now is for us to examine and wait to see how the rest of the world will react to the Arab world's plan for Gaza. I want to suggest that in the meantime, we forget what Mr. Netanyahu. Let's forget about him for the time being. To put it bluntly, he's a dead man walking. I mean, dead man politically, because he's hanging on to power because of the war. President Trump, in my view, may very well like the Arab plan. Especially he's offered, as he likes to say, a deal from the real estate point of view. So let's watch to see what will play out in this respect on this particular matter, and we can only hope for the best. Let's now move and have a closer look at President Trump's U-turn on Ukraine. I think millions around the world saw the disastrous encounter for Zelensky at the White House when he engaged in a shouting match with the President of the United States and the Vice President, Mr. J.D. Vance. Now, it occurred to me that was total disrespect. How could you go to the President's office and engage in that kind of shouting match and disrespecting the office? And that's how it came across to me. And that's why I said it was a disastrous encounter for Zelensky. There was this shouting match that all of us witnessed that turned out to be a disaster for Mr. Zelensky. And there was a fallout, obviously. So what was the fallout? The fallout was that eventually it was announced that the U.S. has suspended military aid to Ukraine. U.S. $1 billion in arms and ammunition, which is in the pipeline. Money has already been approved for that. as well as millions set aside to buy new military hardware from the United States, all of that has gone. As we would say in Guyana, all of that gone for China. Half of the U.S. $175 billion in armed purchases cannot be accounted for. And this is what Mr. Trump is seeking. What happened to half of U.S. $175 billion in arms purchases that cannot, to this day, be accounted for? At the same time, we are hearing from some European countries that they're planning to put boots on the ground in Ukraine, claiming that they will be a peacekeeping force. But the point is that the Russians, the US, and some European countries are opposed to that move because many have opined that this could lead to a bigger war on Ukrainian soil and perhaps beyond. So that's the reason why President Trump is pushing hard for Ukraine and Russia to meet and to talk settlement of the war. Because he is seeing, and he mentioned that in his conversation with Zelensky, that if he doesn't sit down and deal with this matter, there could be a third world war. There are the Ukraine and some European countries are not interested in any peace discussion or any discussion on a settlement of the war. In the meantime, on the military front, we are informed that Russia is pushing further to the west of Ukraine, meaning more and more territory is being occupied by the Russian army. And if Mr. Zelensky doesn't sit down and engage in peace talks with Russia, he could eventually end up losing more and more territory to Russia. So let's see what happens on that front. Now let me recap. In this show, we dealt with Venezuela's incursion in Guyana's territorial sea, as well as the tremendous solidarity that the government received, Guyana government received from the international community, protesting and demanding Venezuela's respect for Guyana's territorial integrity and national sovereignty. We also dealt with developments in the Middle East, where plans are being suggested. One, the American administration has a plan that is characterized by the ceasefire. We also have a suggestion or a plan by Mr. Netanyahu to starve the Palestinians, to push them out of their homeland onto other countries, which they said, no, they're not going. And then, on the other hand, we spoke also about developments in Russia on the Russian-Ukraine, on the question of the Russian-Ukraine war and what is happening there. Interesting developments in every one of those areas, and I would encourage you to follow them very closely as best as you can, because they will help you understand a lot of international maneuvers and developments that are taking place, which you might have an interest in. So long until Saturday, March the 8th, 2025. We look forward to you viewing our program. Goodbye.